Shalom, students. This is Professor Laney. We are in Child Development 110, Child Family Society, and today we are doing Chapter 2, Ecology of Socialization. Again, I have mentioned to you guys, I'm trying to make my screen here better. I mentioned to you guys that I super duper love this stuff. And let me see if I can make it a little bit smaller. Yes, make it a little bit smaller. And then I can share screen. And if I super duper love this stuff, then I'm going to talk a lot about it. However, my goal is to keep this within an hour, so it's not like going on forever. Plus on YouTube, you can stop it and rewind it and forward it and do all that business. So hoping that this is as fascinating to you as it is to me, at least by the end of the presentation. So again, this is chapter 2. Chapter 1 is all the ecology about children. This is ecology about children is all about how do children get socialized, right? And socialization is that lifelong process of becoming an adult in our society. And it doesn't necessarily mean about children, but since we are child development, we do kind of lean towards children. Could be a childlike person to a new society as well. So if we're talking about why or children get socialized, this one is more like what is socialization? Where does it occur? We talk about agents of socialization in chapter 1, but now we're going to talk about the processes of socialization. So super, super duper excited about this. So again, if you look at the beginning of every chapter, we put this socialization sketch. And the reason I'm bringing your attention to it, I have it on my loose leaf version of the book, page 38. Urie Bronfenbrenner. He is the guy who made this model, this theory with all those circles that we went over last week. It tells you a little bit about him. And the cool thing about him is that I did put it in our module at the bottom, videos where he's on there. And so he's from like a Eastern Europe type situation, and he did immigrate to our country. So he saw socialization processes happening similarly in both places. So that's again how a theory stays true, is if it can apply to different situations, in this case different countries. So Bronfenbrenner was a huge proponent for early childhood education. In fact, he helped the president at the time, Lyndon Johnson, create universal kindergarten and the Head Start program. What? So he's not just a guy who wrote a book and had a theory about all these circles. Good stuff. Please read that. I do put that as questions on quizzes and stuff. So I learned when I was at Cal State Fullerton taking sociology classes, one of the professors said, even if it's a caption under a picture, it's fair game for a quiz or a test question. It's like genius. So hint. Okay, so let's jump right in. Excuse me. Okay. So socialization processes. Again, if socialization is this lifelong process, it doesn't just show up and stop, right? It's not like a season where a season comes once a year. This is a lifelong process. I don't know how you see it. Do you see it in like a graduating triangle? Do you see it like a train on a track? Do you see it? There's different ways to see this, but again, socialization as a process, it has these different effects on it. And again, in 107, we talked about internal effects. These are now external effects. So biological, our nature, this is our genetics, right? But how that biology, how we are, let's say I'm a woman, right? I'm a woman, middle-aged woman, and how I interact with the environment, the socio-cultural, the nurture, right? Even in my family, I was the second girl out of 3. So I had a brother, a sister, me, and a little sister. And how I developed as a middle child or a second middle, but a middle daughter was a lot different. How my older sister was socialized, how my little sister was socialized, and even the eldest boy. So gender, I brought my gender to the game, right? I was born as a girl, and that's a conversation for another time, how that can change and how that, whatever. I brought to the table, I'm a girl, but how was I socialized? By the way, 2 years of age difference here, 6 years here, 10 years here. So I was almost raised as an only child, and she was definitely raised nearly to an only child. So really kind of interesting. And I'm sure a lot of you have similar stories too. So our nature combines with our nurture, and all these different factors, again, on the outside and the inside of our body, right, are moving around. I just, one of my husband's former coworkers just this week told him, he's like, yeah, my one son's transitioning to be a girl. And so that was really kind of cool because my husband had a lot of questions and my son was there in the middle of that conversation too. So it was really kind of neat. And my son later said, you know, at 10 years old and you know for sure that you want to transition, he goes, that must be really different. That must be really scary. And I was like, yeah, it is. Again, it could be. So we'll have to talk to her later and see if she wants to have an open conversation about it. So that's kind of cool. So we talk about experience expectant and experience dependent issues here, meaning our experiences sometimes are expected. So like getting taller, getting older, going through puberty, learning language, those are sort of expected traits or expected growth as a human individual, right? And so our brain grows and creates these skills and qualities, but also the outside world helps support. So if you were on a deserted island when you were like 2 years old, or you were raised by wolves and there was no other humans, you would still learn the language, but it wouldn't be like a human language. It would be like the dogs or maybe some other language of, you know, fish and crabs and whatever, right? Then under our nurture piece, that experience dependent, our experiences that we learn and makes our brain grow are dependent on the things that we're exposed to. So for example, I like this example. I have a friend who, she graduated college and she went into the Peace Corps and she was stationed in South America. And she herself was a new person to our country. She's from Myanmar, or Burma, it used to be called. And so she learned all the American ways, you know, very acculturated. And then when she went to South America, she met a young man there. Of course, they fell in love and they got married, and she brings him home to America. And she says, okay, well, let's go to Disneyland. He goes, well, what's Disneyland? Now, a bunch of you just gasped and clutched the pearls, right? Because what's Disneyland? He had never even heard of it. He didn't know what Mickey Mouse was. I mean, living where he lived, that was not even in his bubble of understanding. So she goes, he goes, well, why would we go there? She goes, well, it's fun. He goes, well, like fun? What do you mean fun? Like he didn't have even like a big concept of fun, where she goes, it's like entertainment. He's like, well, what's so she said, you go there and you go on a bunch of rides. And he said, well, where do they take you? And she goes, oh, they just loop back. And like, you know, he goes, well, why would you do that? So he had no experience of Disneyland. So he didn't know, his brain was never exposed to a theme park, anything like that. So it was interesting. So as a new person, childlike to our society, she was teaching him about our society. So our genes and our biology come with the outside forces, and they all work together to help this process over the lifetime occur. Again, these are always interactive factors, meaning it's never just genes, it's never just biology, and it's never just outsides. So again, I told you in my family, I share genetically the same traits as all 4 of my siblings, but we came out all different, we went into different fields, we moved all different areas, like same parents, still married to this day, all the same. We look different, the whole business, but again, we share genetics. So there's this piece where some of the things are similar and some of the things are very, very different. So again, our genetics and our environment interact constantly. Now, socialization as a process has like goals or aims, right? And it really is for people, for young people or new people, to develop a self-concept, as in, who am I? Who am I in relationship to other people? Like, am I stronger, faster, smarter, or am I less strong? Am I less fast? Am I less smart? Right. So again, and then self-esteem is that value we place on that. So let's say if you really think being smart is important, then you're going to put a high value on that if you are smart. If you're not smart, that could kind of lower your self-esteem. But make sure you know these definitions here. Again, if I put an equal sign, that means it's a definition from the book. I will ask a lot of questions on self-concept, self-esteem, self-efficacy. Make sure you know those. But remember here, self-esteem is a value that one places, that you place on your own, right? It's not somebody else. Somebody else told me I have really bad self-esteem. They lowered my self-esteem. No, you took their opinion and you brought it into yourself and you believed it. Then you lowered your own. People can think highly of you, poorly of you, and it's none of your business, right? I tell people other people's opinion of me is none of my business. Have a good opinion, have a bad opinion. Does it change who I am? Nope. But your 20s is this is around the time when you figure those things out. But I know a lot of people who haven't really switched that on until about 40. So it's a process. It's a process. It just keeps going. You keep learning, right? We've all learned so much about ourselves in the last couple years with this pandy. It's really this self-concept. Everybody got shocked, and then there was a lot of dipping, and there's still a lot of dipping, but this self-concept of who I am, what do I want to study, who do I want to be, what kind of career do I want to have, what kind of job do I want to tolerate, what kind of partner do I want, what hobbies make me happy. This self-concept has actually starting to be a really solid foundation for people to build a better self-concept and self-esteem on top of, which is really exciting. Again, when you have a good self-esteem, a high self-concept, high self-esteem, you can perform tasks better. You can attempt new tasks. You can build relationships. And this is a Japanese little diagram here of the embodiment or the hierarchy of self, right? And I forgot what the name is, but it's really cool. Again, when you have awareness and thought, you know things. I'm aware of things. I'm smart about things, and so I know that. If you have awareness and emotion, you can see things, right? You can interact, you can engage with other people, because it takes emotions to engage with truly, deeply with other people. When you have concept of your body, self-concept of your own body and emotion, you understand the concept of being. And when you have thoughts and your thoughts that go through your body that actually physically perform, you act. So when you have all these things here in constant, this is like a Bronfenbrenner, but in a different culture, right? And this is how you conceptualize who you are as a self. It's a beautiful thing. Yeah. And now we did talk briefly about Erickson in 107. Well, actually 107 goes all the way through. We talk about Erickson because Erickson is one of these theorists who developed his theory that went through entire life. Now, if you remember, like Piaget only went up to like 5 years old, 8 years old. Freud only went up to 8 years old, but Piaget's got it. I mean, excuse me, Erickson is the man. I really like this guy because you look at all these stages an entire lifetime, meaning you can have a newborn baby at home and you can have your grandparents in the same home, and everybody's working out these stages. It depends on your life. It depends on your age and how you've developed. Now, keep in mind, there are two different things in each stage, and it's called resolving a crisis. And a crisis is not a bad thing in psychology, neither in sociology. And it's really, we resolve kind of in a positive way or in a negative way. And what you're going to need to know for sure at the beginning, like again in 107, we start with infancy. So trust versus mistrust, meaning when infants are born, that is their number one goal to work out is, do I trust the universe? When I cry, does someone bring me a bottle? When I cry, does someone change me? When I cry, does someone hold me? If the answer is no, they don't necessarily gain trust, right? What if you cried and cried and cried and nobody came to you? Guess what? There's lots of studies, older studies, because it's kind of unethical now, about what happens when you don't respond to a child for a day or a week or a month or 3 months. Yeah, Romanian orphanages in the 50s and 60s, they did it. And by the way, I added some videos in the module. They're heartbreaking. So if you can't handle seeing a depressed infant, just no. But if you're curious about that, how a child gets responded to makes a huge difference. And we'll go way, way more into this in chapter 3. But just know, as children and young adults keep going, they are trying to resolve these conflicts. So I have a 14-year-old at home. Guess what? Guess what we're working on right now? Identity versus identity diffusion. He likes boys and girls. Now, thankfully, his environment is totally down with that. I'm like, whatever, you just have to be a good guy. Whatever partner you're going to be, whoever your partner is, you just have to be a good partner. And so he's kind of like, well, I like this guy and I like this girl. I'm like, it's okay to like both. Especially now in our society, we're a lot more comfortable with that versus maybe 50 years ago, even 20 years ago. So again, this right here could go all the way through, and identity versus identity fusion. Sometimes it's not just sexual identity. It's just like, what group do I belong to, right? If you are secure in your sexual identity, maybe it was like, what group do I hang out with? The jocks or the smarties or the whatever, the burnout, like whatever your group is. Sometimes it takes a while to click in. And then later, like in college, it's more like this. Do I want a partner? Do I just want a bunch of friends? Do I want to settle down? Do I want a family? Blah, blah, blah. And it's moving later and later. So we're seeing this stage, intimacy versus isolation. Sometimes it's okay to be alone. And a lot of young people like that, or they just have a lot of friends, you know, we're connected and interconnected through media and social media. So sometimes we don't need a partner because we have that. But then later you're like, oh, maybe I do want a partner. Do I want to marry? Less people are getting married. We'll talk about that chapter 3. And then you're going to get up here into your parents and then your grandparents. It's fantastic. So look at that next time you're at a gathering. It's fantastic. Here's another way to look at it. Here's these crises. Again, infants, trust versus mistrust. And as we go up, and again, here we go. Here's adolescence. Yeah, oh my gosh. And then it's unbelievable. This is right on. So again, favorable outcome means obviously, oops, let's not do that. Trust means faith in the environment, faith in the universe, faith that people are going to help you. Because as an infant in like as Homo sapiens or whatever we are, we are very, very dependent on everybody else, right? And again, but if you're not comfortable, and we'll talk a lot more about attachment, you get suspicious of other people. And guess what? This doesn't just stop in infancy. It carries all the way through. So I have a friend who is adopted, and just because you're adopted doesn't mean that you're not, you haven't resolved this trust versus mistrust, but she had kind of an interesting issue. She was adopted a little bit later in life. I adopted my son, I met him the same day he was born. But she's just, we just call her the no-no. Like she just, at first I'll be like, hey, let's get together and go to happy hour. I mean, at least I used to. And she'd be like, no, I can't do that. And then like 5 minutes later, okay, I think. So that's just her like walls that she brings up. And we just give it a sec. Just give it a sec. She'll be fine. But again, think about that. As you grow up, you physically get older, you chronologically get older. If you're not trusting the universe, how does that, work here in adolescence? Wait, let's work here, industry versus inferiority. This is like six years old to like right up to middle school. What am I good at? What if I'm good at nothing? I don't trust anybody else. Ugh. You get this sense of inferiority at understanding and organizing. What if you're mistrusting and then you have ADHD and then you aren't good at organizing? That's what I have in my house. So there's a lot of things going on here, but Erickson's got it going down. So if you're wondering if I like Erickson and I'm going to ask you questions on Erickson, the answer is yes. Every chapter. Okay, let's just keep going. All right, so aims of socialization. Why do we even socialize? What are we trying to do here? Okay, self-regulation. And I shouldn't have to explain this too much, but because we've seen people on the internet now more than ever, like literally dysregulated, literally in Walmart, freaking out, screaming, shouting in tongues, screaming scripture, just having a fit, or at Starbucks. I mean, how many videos are, if I put in there, like somebody, adult temper tantrum, you just, right? So what happens is that people, again, guess what? If they're mistrusting, they've learned to have a big fit to get what they want. Woo! We'll get all the way into that too. But again, if our society does a good job at socialization, everybody's kind of like chill a little bit, right? We're not freaked out all the time. How about self-regulation says, drive on the right side of the road. In our country, we drive on the right side of the road. Except for in the British Virgin and the American Virgin Islands, left-hand drive. But here's the thing. Self-regulation means following the rules a little bit too. Yeah. So again, or when you want to like lose it in a safe way, right? Lose it somewhere, maybe private. Empower achievement is another thing that we want people to learn, how to successfully be independent, how to go for some sort of goal that they have, right? And have like an internal or even external motivation. So there's 4 kinds of motivation here. We have positive and negative. Positive is going towards a goal and negative is going away. So if you're saying, I want to lose weight because I want to get healthy, that's positive. You say, I want to lose weight because I need to lose weight. I need to get away. I need to run away from being fat, right? That's so some people are motivated that way. Some people are not. Negative's not always good. Okay. Intrinsic means you want to do it just because you want to do it. Extrinsic means you're doing it because someone is giving it to you. What? Right. But guess what? this analogy here talks about people working in an office. Let's talk about you as a student, right? Instead of saying, I'm going to do this assignment because it's going to get me points. Oh, that's fine. It's like extrinsic motivation, but it's positive because you're gaining something, right? Or how about, I'm going to do this assignment because I don't want to lose points. Negative is not always a good mindset to be in. And I just really don't want to do it, so I'm not going to do it. That's cool. We got options, right? But the bottom line here is I really want to do this assignment because I'm really fascinated about it. That's the right mindset. And I'm not saying everybody has to have that, but that's a really good place to be. It's a good feeling. This is the only one that really works, right? And employers try to do this. If you make this many cold calls, you get this much of a bonus. It's like, oh God, everyone's just like, I'm here, but I don't want to be here. And a lot of people are quitting their jobs because it's just not a good fit. And this is the point here. Ask yourself what motivates you and empowers you. And there's this big video here. It's really, really, really cool. It's a big whiteboard one, the surprising piece that motivates us. So watch that on your own time. It's a good one. And by the way, as a side note, any extra credit you can do, like watching a video, going to an event, anything like that, that has to do with this class, I will take it 2-page paper, a write-up on that, prove to me that you did it, like you actually went. And then, what was I going to say? Oh, yeah, wait, go prove it, 2-page paper, 5 points. Sorry, a little blip there. Again, another aim of socialization is to teach appropriate social roles, right? Again, driving on the wrong side of the street, not appropriate social roles. Walking into Rite Aid and boosting a bunch of stuff and walking out, not an appropriate social role, right? You either fit in the group or you don't. There's consequences. I know a lot of times we're seeing a lot of things on the news where people are like stealing stuff and not having consequences. Yeah, it catches up with them. Yeah. But children learn social roles from adults. And we'll learn about different phrases that adults use and different techniques that adults use or more seasoned members of our society use to actually teach these things. And sometimes they're invisible teachings and sometimes they're very clearly taught. We're going to talk about that in this one. It's very, very cool. Let's see what's next. And implement developmental skills, meaning these are the 10 things that every society, I told you, we normally talk about what happens in America here, but researchers put together all these aims of socializations, even in bush tribes of the Amazon and whatnot, that these are kind of the 10 shared goals that every society looks to do with their children, right? Appropriate dependence and independence pattern. Sometimes you got to just be, as we'll learn in this class, is like, again, infants are very dependent. As you grow, you're very not dependent on your parents. But then sometimes you got to come back and then, oh, guess what? The script flips and then they're dependent on you, right? Achieving an appropriate giving, receiving pattern of affection. If you're always pushing up on somebody, trying to get some extra lovin's, that's inappropriate, right? It's got to be equals, right? Because no means no, right? For both men and women. Relating to changing social groups. Ugh, did our social groups change in the last 2 years? You bet they did. Developing a conscience. Oof. Do you feel okay with your choices? You feel not okay, right? Learning one's own psychobiological role. Our psychology, ourself, and our biological role. That could mean, are you a person who participates in society? Are you a person who expects society to give you everything? Are you concerned about the environment? Do you have hobbies? It's just like, who are you psychobiologically? Accepting and adjusting to a changing body. Holy cow. By the way, puberty is not the only time that your body changes. And in 107, we talk about how puberty and like menopause for women is actually like a very similar process, just opposite. Very cool. Managing a change. Okay, managing, we already said that. Learning to understand and control the physical world, which is interesting. So if it rains, are you just going to be like, I can't go anywhere? Or do you get an umbrella? Right? Sometimes we can control certain things. Sometimes we can't. And so do we adapt? Or do we just sit there and whine and just let the house fall down on us? Right? This is part of that. Who are you? And are you able to do these things? Are you dependent on others? Right? Some sort of balance right in the middle is what we're going for as human beings in every society in the world, right? And then developing an appropriate symbol system and conceptual abilities. That means language. Our language is a shared symbol system, right? And if I had to go move to Korea, I would have to learn the symbol system. Yeah. But or I don't, and then I'm not really socializing myself to that culture, that's society, right? And last is relating to oneself in the cosmos, which is like, who am I? Existentially, bigger picture here. Some people have these questions. Some people have big questions. Some people barely have those questions, but how important are you? How big are you? How smart are you? How much do you know? How much do you not know? And what can you contribute during this particular lifetime? Well, big deals. Developmental tasks is, again, somewhere between an individual need and a societal demand. Now, again, our society says, please get a job. And if you can't, for some reason you're disabled, we can provide you some financial support. However, we know that that's not really a lot of money to help, right? So again, what we have is, like, in the last 2 years, a lot of people lose their job. Our society provided some support there. You know, there are some people who took advantage of the unemployment situation. I even know people who made more money unemployed than they did actually employed. So somewhere in between laying on the couch all day and taking all the, all the free money or whatever's out there, or you making so much money, you're going to run yourself into the dirt because you're working so hard, somewhere in between. So developmental tasks are not just money either. There's cultural diversity that comes with these tasks. So for example, potty training. I mean, we do have adult diapers, but ultimately we don't want to wear diapers unless we have to, right? So somewhere between being an infant and being an adult, can we go without diapers? Sure. But potty training can actually be different in different countries, right? We don't have expectations. We do have expectations in our country by like possibly 5, if there's no large developmental delays, possibly by 5, maybe by 4, even earlier. Kind of depends on how ready the child is, that they're, independent with the toilet, right? But sometimes there's still accidents, right? Just general independence, right? A lot of times part of the socialization process is to get your children hyper dependent on you. That's not super healthy, right? Not super balanced. And then what if there's 2 different cultures? Yikes. I know a lot of times at school, there's one culture, there's the dominant culture, and education is its own culture. And we have these rules and things like that. Even in this class, there's its own culture. I have different syllabus. I have different policies. Every single class you're going to take, you're going to be like, well, in Professor Laney's class, she's really flexible with due dates, except discussion boards. But in other classes, I can't be 1 minute late or else it's a 0. So you have to learn these different cultures and kind of navigate in between. That's why we don't put all these rules on little kids. We look for young adults who can manage these things. Now, agents of socialization. This is huge. Okay. This is like the biggest part. This is like the biggest part of this chapter. Love this. By the way, this feathers into the discussion board. So I want to make sure that you guys are very aware of what an agent of socialization is. We talked a little bit about this in chapter 1, but let's do a little piece here. Now, if you look on page, again, I have the loose leaf chapter, page 40 with the entire Bronfenbrenner model, you're going to see the middle part. Again, we talk about the microsystem. We see family, school, childcare, community, media, and peers. Those are your primary agents of socialization. Your very first one is your family, right? So families, we have different dimensions of families. Like, what is our orientation? We talked about collectivistic versus individualistic, right? Coping style, active versus passive, or maybe passive aggressive, right? Attitude, submissive versus equal, egalitarian is French for equals, and communication, restrained versus private. I used to call this thing, don't talk about it, because it didn't happen if you don't talk about it. I used to call that the great white way. And then I realized that transcends culture. Like every family does that. We don't talk about that. We don't talk about. And then Disney comes out with a song called We Don't Talk About Bruno. I was like, brilliant, brilliant. And by the way, that happens in like every family. We just don't talk about it. Don't talk about it. It doesn't happen. We don't talk about that. And some families are like, no, we talk about it all. We put it out in the open. It's like, we're loud and proud. Somebody messed up and we're just going to talk through it. Right. So every family is a little bit different, but those differences is what socializes a child. Exciting, super exciting. Love this stuff. Love this stuff. Your next one is school and childcare. Yeah, a lot of children are in childcare at very young ages, or we're starting school. We're talking about universal preschool now. So kids will be able to be in preschool by 3. A lot of times we do have other programs like Head Start and whatnot that do offer programs up to as young as age 3. But again, it depends on a lot of different factors. But when you go to school, you have like, you know, Miss Marisol or Mr. Steve, like teaching you. Like right now, my son has, he has a one-on-one aid for his disability. It is a nice young man. He's like 31, but he's strong and kind and fit and tall and like even keel. He just, I was like, he is like the best guide for my teenage child right now. He's like he's almost like a mentor or like a path maker. So versus if I have my teenage son with a woman, he's going to be like, oh, I just see you as another mom. And yeah, he will say, oh, mom, you're just like so-and-so teacher at school. I'm like, oh yeah, but you need a young man, like a nice adult man to show you what it's like to be a man. Right. So think about that. For our schools are primarily women. Our teachers are primarily women. Yeah. So what does that mean for young men or little boys? So it's a big deal. I fought. And then I also have therapists that come to the house. I fought for men too. Again, ABA therapists or counselors, mostly women. So fighting to get somebody who my child could model or emulate, right? So each teacher has goals and how they talk and how we all remember our favorite teacher. And we have a whole chapter on this, right? By the way, every agent of socialization has its own chapter. So family, that's chapter 3. Then we're going to get into 6, 7, 8. Then we go into schools and teaching has its own chapters. Then we have one for media, one for peers, one for community. So yeah, we'll dig pretty deep on these guys right here. Classroom management is huge. The classroom is society. So I do have a friend who is teaching 3rd grade, and she's like, I have this one kid who just wants to mouth off to me, and how I handle him. They're all staring at me like how I handle him, and how you handle him kind of shows your mustard, right? Who you are. And do you get your buttons pushed? And maybe you do, you know, teachers are human. But she just basically said, hey, mister, like, do you really want to argue about this right now? Because I am the teacher. Look around you. I'm here to teach you. And if you want to argue, you may go do that elsewhere. We're not doing that here. So she just puts it down. Like, if this is the time that you want to battle, let's battle. But we're not doing it right now. Right. So again, childcare can be like preschool, like literally preschool. And so how that day is structured or what children are exposed to. Remember, we talked about experience dependent, right? If you just put a child in childcare and you put them in front of a tablet all day, yeah, they might be watching Teletubbies or Sesame Street, but they're not getting the enrichment. They're not getting the human factor. So again, chapter 5 is going to dig real deep into that. Super excited. Okay. Did I go too far? I think I did. Let's see. Yeah. Next one is peers. Oh, especially now in young adulthood or in adolescence, peers very socializing. Have you ever heard of your parents saying, don't hang around that person because they're a bad influence? You know, that's a parent speak for saying you're becoming like that person, and that person that makes different choices that we would make in our family or how you were raised. I mean, thankfully, my child goes to a very, we're like the scholarship family at a private school. So a lot of these kids come from a lot of money. And yeah, like his friends like, oh, just got my driver's license. And I get to drive my mom's. It's like, kid, you're not getting a car or a driver's license till after 18. Oh yeah. So it's this thing where around him, his culture, his peers are actually a lot higher functioning than my own child. They don't argue so much, you know, and they're not throwing rocks at another kid. I was like, leave, right? So again, sometimes the peers can be great influences and sometimes they're not, you know, and I think most children do go through periods or little moments of rebellion, and you know, it's part of the deal. I'm just very grateful that he's got some really nice people that he's around, really wholesome, kind, thoughtful, communicative, you know, no weird, nasty, mean people around him, which is really, really fun. I love, that's not what I had growing up. So I really like watching sociology play out in my child, right? Because again, genetically, he's not mine, but biologically, but environmentally, he is very much mine. By the way, he talks like me. He's hyperlexic. He was very hyperlexic as little. So his environment really kind of kicked in. Yeah. And so again, peers, again, I don't have to talk too much about this because you guys know, even when we get older, by the way, like mom peers and dad peers, when we get older, they do make a difference. We do have friends that are outside our, high school and things like that. Or you might still have the friends that you had from high school. I still have a nice group of friends from middle school. And it's interesting how we all kind of turned out or didn't, or influence each other or don't. It's really kind of fun to see all that. And egocentrism, this is a huge piece of peers, the cognitive inability to see the world from any other point of view than one's own. It's that, so when people say to a teenager, my God, it's all about you, and it's you're so me, and yeah, that's kind of where their brain's at. Developmentally is pretty normal. But it's also a characteristic of autism. So now I have a teenager with autism. And so I say, okay, let's take some perspective. What is the perspective of this other person? How do you think they were feeling? It's hard. I have to really sit and talk to him about that. But again, peers can say, hey, don't do that. You weren't thinking about me. You were thinking about yourself. And so sometimes when peers teach, much better than parents, especially at certain ages, right? Media, holy cow. Holy cow. Does media and social media teach people how to be? Yeah. There's studies that come out now that says Instagram actually can cause Instagram in adolescents, young adolescents, like 11, 12, can cause like depression, and that the inadequacy, and that comparing ourselves, and then that lowering our self-esteem. It's called filters, baby. People try to show the best parts of themselves. That doesn't necessarily mean it's reality. So yeah, and we'll talk about this, an entire chapter on media, and we go deep. It's fantastic. I took an entire class at Cal State Fullerton on media and socialization processes. Awesome. Again, these in our in the community, agents of socialization is like so our society here, we here in Orange Park Acres, we have like we're on this east side, we're kind of a hidden gem. I mean, we have horse trails, and to me, the community here expects a higher like caliber of people. I mean, I live in Santa Ana, I live down the hill. My neighborhood is like half rental, half owners. So there's this piece where you can kind of see what the expectation is. Think about this. If you live in Irvine, they even have street names named after universities, right? Yale and things like that. They have UCI and Irvine Valley College, right? Orange, we have like the Orange School District is pretty big, but we have one community college. And so, and we're kind of hidden. So what does the community say about that, right? Our larger community as our society, and we'll talk about that in the macro system, says, yeah, education is important, right? Doesn't necessarily mean it's for everyone, but it's important. Social capital is the things that you can count on when you don't have any money, right? Here at SEC, we're trying to increase people's social capital. We have the food bank, we have other necessities in there, we have other support systems and things like that. And then advocacy, you guys know about this, is supporting a group either by action or writing or any other sort of activity. Okay, now methods. Whew. These are the methods that each group uses. Now you may see some of these as familiar here, and we have about 20 minutes left. This is perfect. Whew. Methods. How do these agents, how does this microsystem essentially teach how to be socialized, right? And again, socialization does not mean being social, because you can be very introverted and still be socialized to our society, right? So affective, this is the very first one. Affective, people say, oh, effective, it's not the E. E means producing a result, like 1 + 1 is 2, the effect, right? Affective means our emotions. The human component, it could be producing an effect, but it has to do with the human affect, right? Okay, so feelings, right? And then did I say figure 2.1? Let's see, 2 points, we're on 2.4. I'm going all the way through to 2.4. Okay, let's see. I'm not sure if that figure 2.1 is accurate. Let's see. 2.0. See figure 2.1. Figure. Let's see. Oh, you know what? It's towards the back. Hold on. Okay, so let's do this. This is a nice way of looking at all of them together. It's at the end of all the methods of socialization. This is one of my favorite little, hold on, it's towards, there we go. Again, I'm on the loose leaf book, and it is chapter 2, page 74, table 2.3, summary of methods of socialization. This is the cool part because it puts them all next to each other. So I'll go through each one, and at the end there's a summary, and it kind of puts it all together. So this one, affective effect, the effect, notice it says effect emerges from feeling. So anytime you use feelings to teach a child how to be an adult, even a guilt trip is feelings, right? But affective is our feelings, but attachment is how we are connected to somebody. I wish our book talked more about attunement, is how we attune to people. Attune, how are we like noticing their moods? And sometimes we can attune better than others, right? But attachment is, are we attached? Remember that Ericksonian trust versus mistrust? See how it all goes together? When there's trust, you have an emotional connection. When there's mistrust, it's hard, right? So like, for example, when I was getting married and I was planning my wedding at the Fullerton Arboretum, my mom says, well, your grandmother, if she were alive today, she would really want you to be married in a church. Guilt trip? You betcha. And I was like, what? I think grandma would really want me to be happy and get married in the place that her and I used to go to. Logic? Yeah. All right. So again, but if like I was walking down the street and somebody said, you know, your grandmother really wants you to get married in a church, I'd be like, who are you? Your opinion doesn't matter to me. If there's not a connection, that emotional piece doesn't really work. Oof. And things can change over time, because when you're little, everything your parents say is like the truth. And when you get older, you're like, not so much. So affective, big one, big one. Do people in your bubble use that to, come on, you didn't go out with us last week. Come on. Yeah. Next one is operant. Now this one sounds a little bit more clinical, but this is if you are into ABA, behavior management, behavior therapy. This is the one that we learned in 107 that has to do with Pavlov and the dog salivating with the bell or the metronome or whatever, right? This has to do with reinforcing or increasing desired behaviors. Different people act differently when it comes to desired outcomes and behaviors. So for example, if I say to my son, can you take out the trash? And he's like, oh, I don't want to, and then does, I'm like, thank you, buddy. I really appreciate it. It helps out the family a lot. And you are growing into a nice, mature young man. Now, truth, I give him 3 reinforcing behaviors, maybe a pat on the shoulder, a kiss, a hug, or say, can I make you a sandwich? Right. So reinforcing, and those desired behaviors increase. Versus if I say, take out the trash, you piece of, you teenage punk. Like if I went at him like that, do you think the trash would get taken out? Do you think the trash would get taken out all the time? No. Reinforce the positive outcomes and you will get more of the positive outcome. So even when he like takes his meds on time, you took your meds, awesome. Thank you for remembering. I'm really excited that you're going to have a good day that way. Yeah. So 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Extinction is that one at the bottom is very challenging. It's that thing where, you know, you're at Target and there's a kid crying and the parents are ignoring them. And you're like, why are you ignoring your child? They're doing it on purpose. Because if you as a stranger even walk up to a child and go, oh my God, baby, are you okay? Do you think their crying goes down or does their crying go up? They just got attention. Boom. So extinction is a planned ignoring, and it's very, very hard to do because you have other people in the system. Grandma's kind of bust out at extinction all the time, meaning like the parents are like, we are not giving that kid the tablet. The grandma's like, oh, here you go. You're like, right? So extinction is one of those things where you're trying to get that bad behavior to disappear by not literally not giving it any fuel to the fire. It's hard, not easy at all. More operant methods, and think of the word operant as not like operating, like surgery, it's more order of operations, like in math, like you have to do things in order to produce the right outcome, right? So again, you have to have, even with punishment, and I'll talk about that in a second, any sort of reinforcement, whether it's punishment, extinction, negative reinforcement, positive reinforcement, we'll talk about this, you have to have the right timing. I can't say, hey, 6 months ago when you changed the oil in my car, things that really helped. No, it doesn't stick, right? Reasoning, it has to be logical. You can't say, hey, that was super awesome that you stole your friend's pen and threw it in his face. Good job. Super sarcastic. But is that behavior going to go down? No, I'm giving that reinforcement. It sounds kind of positive, but it's not. So you're going to see more of this, stealing a pen and throwing it in someone's face behavior, right? Consistency. You have got to be consistent. I see a lot of parents go, hey, go clean your room. And then what happens when they don't? You got to follow through. If you can't follow through, don't even say it. Yeah. And again, you have to have the attachment to that person for that to even make a dent and an effect. Now, going back to punishment here, it can be, punishment is not necessarily like physical abuse. No, we don't really advocate for that whatsoever. But punishment can be taking something away or adding something. So when my son was having a fit the other day at school, like a fit for the smallest reason I know was big to him, I said, I tell you what, we'll talk about it after school, but I've already taken your Switch away. And he's like, oh, and then his aide texts me, he did a turnaround. I said, yeah, I took his Switch away. Or I go, I say, like, every time I say, pick up your socks that are in the middle of the room and you don't, I'm going to add a chore. Ooh, took something away or added something. Sometimes I do both. Kind of depends on what that child responds to. You got to know each children differently. Okay, and so again, operant there's these other methods inside of the operant conditioning is feedback. Hey, buddy, I notice how you're really taking the time to slow down and do things in a logical sequence. It makes it easier for you, and the outcome turns out really good. Let's say his math. Let's say cleaning his room. Let's say skateboarding or whatever like that. So if I give him feedback, just kind of like the coach, is that desired behavior going to increase? Yeah. Again, timing has to be right. We have to have a connection. Yeah, it has to be consistent, right? And then learning by doing. Sometimes, so he really wanted to make egg rolls the other day. I was like, dude, let's go get some because those are very labor intensive. So he said, no, I really want to make it. I said, all right, we got all the stuff. I did this hard stuff. He did this stuff that he could do. And then we sat and rolled egg rolls. I was like, and then at the end I said, so is this something that we want to keep doing? Or is this something that just want to go get like frozen egg rolls? He's like, frozen egg rolls. Exactly. We're learning by doing, at least then later I'm socializing him to pick his battles, right? Socializing him to pick his battles, right? You really want egg rolls? Well, if you don't have a lot of money, you can't go buy frozen egg rolls or whatever egg rolls out there. Then yeah, you'll make them because it is cheaper to make them, but it did take an hour to make 20, right? Okay. Observational. This is a lot of times how people learn. This is how we literally sometimes will say, watch me do this. Do exactly as I do. Driver's training, doing our hair, getting dressed, doing any sort of sports. Sometimes it's easier to observe somebody do it. So for me, and a lot of us are very visual. When I see somebody do, that's why YouTube videos are so important. Like I could say, how do I change a distributor cap in my car? I can go find a YouTube video for it, right? So there's a piece in there that obviously watching somebody else do it helps. Did we look up how to roll an egg roll video? Yes, sure did, right? And again, some things can be learned best way and some things can't. Now, cognitive. This is when your agent of socialization is super smart and using their brain, and they always talk in the brain language. That tends to be me. I tend to be a very cognitive mother. So I'll say, think about it for a sec, buddy. If you throw your pen in somebody else's face, what kind of consequences are you going to get? I don't say, oh, I see that you were struggling with your impulse control of how to get back at your friend because he really hurt your feelings. Some moms do that. That's cool. That's not where I'm at. So I do this. Let's think about it. I kind of walk him through our options. I'm very logical that way. Now I have to tell you, he's not as logical. He's smart, but not as logical, like in those steps. So I do have to kind of back it down and put it in his words, like, tell me what it was like when your friend made you mad first. Oh, okay. So you were really frustrated and hurt. You sound hurt. Yeah, I was hurt. So I wanted to hurt him back. Oh, so you were hurting. So you wanted somebody else to hurt with you. Yeah, I did. But did that make your hurt go away? See, now I won't go back to logic, right? So there's this piece that comes with the logic that's like, hey, we have standards. I don't know if your mom tells you this, but here's me in my house. I desire to live in a clean and organized house where people clean up and wipe up after themselves. Those are my standards. They don't share those standards so much, but I'm socializing a young person to do that, right? Altruism is doing something for somebody else, like cleaning up after somebody when they left their stuff out, or he packed his lunch and left it, so I drove it all the way to school. Altruism, right? But that's kind of what moms do. Moms are generally supposed to be that way. Not all moms, but okay. Sociocentrism is, what do you think it would like to be somebody else in a different country? What if you were a mom, but you lived in Italy? How would you pack a lunch? Right? And then parenting styles. Ooh, we get into parenting styles. It's a big one. Last one for reasoning, and then we'll jump into parenting styles. I'm not going to go too far into transducive, inductive, and deductive. It's how we process information if it happens. So again, transducive is saying like, well, I turned my working on time in this class and I got full points. Maybe if I turned in the work, right? That's the same. Inductive is saying like I got in trouble for hitting Kyle. So if I hit another kid, I'm going to get in trouble too. So it's taking this one situation and applying it to everybody, right? Opposite is, I've been told we can't put our hands on somebody else. Therefore, I can't put my hands on Kyle, right? So this is kind of how the brain works. And by the way, this inductive and deductive reasoning is most acute in the teenage years, because that's when we learn science. So back to the parenting. Parenting, again, is type of cognitive and type of affective, but you're going to see these four. This is a big piece right here of this class, big piece, parenting styles. So again, this is hard to see here, but it says this is responsiveness right here, responsiveness, and this is warmth and supportiveness. So if you have a parent who's low on responsiveness, and they're also right here, this one says behavior contact or demandingness. So if you have a parent who's like not really, doesn't really care, like not really responsive, and they have low right here demandingness, then they're like, I don't care what you do. Some parents are there, right? If there's high responsiveness, like, oh my God, like you're going to a party, like, okay, doesn't matter when you come back, like whatever. That's the permissive parents. And yeah, sounds like Mean Girls movie. I will be showing Mean Girls clips in this class. Yeah. We'll talk a lot more parenting styles in chapter 3 and chapter 4. And then here, this authoritarian sounds like a librarian. High demandingness, but low responsiveness. I demand a lot of stuff and I don't want to have to talk to you about it. Ooh, well, what about high demandingness, but high responsiveness? This is that authoritative parent that says, I'll help you when you need help, but if you don't need my help, you need to learn how to do it on your own, right? This is the ideal right here. It's not, it's more like democratic, like it's doing what's best for the whole family and the child. We'll go way more into depth on those too. Got about 10 minutes left here. Another method of socialization is called sociocultural, meaning does your culture determine how you should act? Now, if you've ever heard, this part of the chapter talks about groups, group pressure, traditions, rituals, and routines. Like, for example, I was raised Catholic, and so that's a very distinct group, right? And there's this thing when you're little, it's like, you know, you do your first communion and you're going to be part of this group and you're making a pledge and things like that. I still think children are a little bit young to be doing that, but that's just me. Everybody has their own choices. And you're accepted to the group when you make this pledge, and what type of group are we, and this is that, and this and that. And so the history and the literature and all this stuff about the group, you're literally teaching a child. You go to catechism, you go to classes, you go to church, you go to Bible study. Like it's socializing. It's using this dominant culture or this subculture to tell you who you are. And some people are great at that. Some people are like, not so much, right? Traditions are, you might hear the phrase, this is what we've always done. Maybe for events, you have the same, like in my house, my parents put up the same tree, the same ornaments, serve the same dishes in the same dishes every year. I gotta do it. In my family that I created, in my married family with my child, we said no traditions. We want to travel. We want to do something different. We want to try different cultures. We want to have a live tree, not a live tree, no tree. The year before last, we put a tree out in the backyard. We decorated it up there. So we do silly stuff because like sometimes just the same thing over and over and again, doesn't work for you. It doesn't work for me. But sometimes it works just fine for everybody else. Rituals and routines. So you could have a daily ritual. You could have a monthly ritual. You could have an annual ritual. Like people say, oh, during spring break, we always go to blah, or during Christmas, we always do this, or every summer we do that, right? Rites of passage. Again, I talked about catechism or even confirmation in the Catholic scope, but it could be a quinceañera. It could be a bar mitzvah, bat mitzvah, right? Again, these rites of passage, it could be it could be anything, you know. In the white community, they used to call it like the cotillion and things like that. I think they still do that, not sure. And then there's routines. Now symbols are different, right? So in the Christian faith, it's usually a cross, but in the Catholic faith, it's the crucifixion. And so every group, whether it's a religion or just, let's say, Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts or anything, there's shared symbols and things like that. So again, group pressure has a lot to do with things like that. So again, let me go back one. So if you ever hear the phrase, we don't do that in this house, that is a socio-cultural method. We don't do that. We don't talk like that. We don't act like that. If you looked at the culture of your family, right? You have family symbols, you have family rituals, rites of passages, and routines. Rites of passages could be graduation, right? So we don't do that, or we do it this way. That is a culture. So think about how you've been taught how to be an adult based on we, right? Same thing. We get married in a church. My sister married a divorced guy in a Catholic church, but it couldn't been on during like mass, right? It had to be like the side. I was just like, because we get married in churches in my family, not I. And now apprenticeship methods. This is guiding. This is like teaching, and it could be like a very scheduled type of teaching. This is how you become a varsity football player, right? That is a group, right? That is a method. And then you can have apprenticeship that could be positive and negative, like gang membership, things like that. Doing drugs, you know, carrying drugs, processing drugs, things like that. So again, apprenticeship could be, hey, let me teach you how to do this in a positive way, or hey, take this backpack over to my cousin over in that car. It could be the same thing, right? But different outcomes, right? Here's the last two pieces, okay? These last pieces of every chapter, they correspond with chapters 11 and 12 in our book, meaning after we learn about all this socialization, what's the outcomes, right? So we talk about emotional, cognitive, social, and behavioral outcomes. Like, how do we know you have become an upstanding citizen of our society, right? Self-regulation, cooperation, morals, and values. Do you kind of fall in line a little bit? You don't have to, like, again, like the greater society has like these rules, like let's say in our society is like make a lot of money, accumulate a lot of wealth, things like that, be thin and pretty, whatever kind of situation. Do you fall in line with that? Maybe some things, but maybe not all of them, but enough, right? Conformity, same thing. Do you drive on the right side of the road? Right? If you could say, well, I grew up in New Zealand when we drive on the left, so I'm never changing. Well, you're not really a safe member of this society. Some conformity has to happen. People kind of really balk at this age. Conformity, I'm not like anyone else. No, you're not like anyone else. But there are certain, I challenge you, go around and see the things that you do follow. So if I'm at the ATM, are you just going to push your way in front of me? No, that's conformity. You wait your turn, waiting your turn. Other societies don't always do that, right? Thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not murder. Like, I mean, that sounds very biblical, but some societies are less focused on those things than our society, right? More outcomes here. This is how we develop values. What do you value? Yeah. What do you value comes from how you've been socialized, who's been socializing you, how they've been socializing you. Yes. What do you believe are important? To me, doing the same thing over and over again is not as important as to other people. I have different values on that. Right? Like millennials value the Congress of marriage less, and I think that's fantastic. Right? So again, values change when society changes. It's a beautiful thing. Attitudes, the tendencies to respond positively, or like, do you believe that poor people are this way, or brown people are this way, or like attitudes? We have attitudes that develop into stereotypes and then racism. Yeah, right. Some people still believe that, women have smaller brains, right? Is that an attitude that you have? Well, doesn't necessarily think it's going to lead you to a good place later. Motives, right? What causes a person to act? And then attributions are the opposite of that. Let's say, like I wanted to create like a journal where I log all the water that I drink. And yeah, I blew that after like 3 or 4 days. Like I stopped writing it down. Like, and so here's my excuse. Like, well, I was just too busy, or I wasn't really drinking, or I'm just not good at patterns. I can come up with an excuse or not. Or let's say I was very successful at it. I'm doing a walking challenge right now and I'm doing pretty well at it. And be like, yeah, well, I did it really quick because I was really motivated because it's fun. Like I can have excuses for my success as well, right? Mastery motivation. Let me underline this here. Mastery motivation. Are you motivated to master something? When's the last time you said, I want to learn something and I'd be really, really good at it? I took up ukulele over the summer and I'm not mastering it by any chance, but maybe someday, right? I'm getting there. Play 5 minutes a day, 10 minutes a day. That's my goal. Self-esteem, we talk more about that. Again, how we are socialized, who socializes us, and how they do it creates our self-esteem, right? We'll talk a lot more about that. Self-regulation, we already talked about that. Like if you were going to like lose your mind at Target, would your family or your severe influence, your peers, support you? If they would say, why are you acting like that? Then they wouldn't agree with that level of socialization, right? We taught you not to, right? I've taught my son to be please and thank you, please and thank you, please and thank you, right? And people tell me he's so polite. Well, okay, cool. I'm glad we got that one down. Let's work on the rest. But again, self-regulation behaviors, how you were socialized, by who you were socialized in which way. Yeah. Same thing. Let's see. Same thing here. Morals is an individual's evaluation was right and wrong. And then lastly, gender roles. I suggest for you guys to look at this last slide here for if you want to talk about nature versus nurture, how I chose peace from the Son of a Terrorist. It's a TED Talk. It's a fantastic one. Okay, so I'm going to cut us off now because I have my next meeting kind of waiting for me. But again, always reach out to me. I'm here for you. And again, if you don't love sociology quite yet, you will, because this all applies to you and me. All right. See you guys soon. Let me know if there's anything I can do to support you.